you just joined us, we are jumping into the third community meeting on the Virginia Range horses. I'm joined here by our panel and our council member Dewar, who will be kicking us off this evening as well. So I think we can get started. We've got quite a few people on the line today and a great amount of information to cover. So let's jump in. Councilmember Dewar. And you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erica, and thank you to everyone who is joining us today on this third virtual forum about the Virginia range horses. We are joined by about 10 staff who all have things to share, experts in their fields. Again, my name's Naomi Dewar. I'm the Reno City Councilwoman for Ward 2. So the Virginia range horses have been a subject of much discussion over the years that I've been in office, the last 8 years. And the issues have really centered on how to keep both horses and people safe. We have about 3,000 horses in the whole Virginia range, which extends almost 300,000 acres, all the way over to the TRIC, or the Tahoe Reno Information. Sorry, guys. Tahoe Regional area, and over to Dayton, down to Carson City, up to Hidden Valley. It's very wide ranging. The challenges in Reno are that as we've expanded, we have moved our developments into range that was typically occupied by horses over at least 100 years, 150 years in the past. And so what's happened is conflicts have occurred. Horses have been hit by vehicles, typically at night. And as an example, last year, to my recollection, we had 17 horses hit. 14 of those were either killed or euthanized in the process. Virtually all vehicles were totaled. Passengers really experienced trauma, and everyone involved found it very, very difficult and traumatic, especially young drivers. Some of the horse hits have been right in front of Damani Ranch High School. Others have been out in Geiger Grade, Toll Road, and other regional areas. So we've been putting on these community sessions really to get good factual information out to the public. Tonight's workshop is going to be very interesting. We've done some research since the last time, some studies, and those are going to be reported on tonight. There's been a lot of interest in how do we keep people and horses separated and in their own zones. How do we reduce the conflicts? How do we share signage? What about watering and feeding horses? Is that okay? Who can do it? Who can't do it? When is it appropriate? The whole issues of speeding on our local roads, and that's why we have representatives of our Reno Police Department here and our traffic folks from Public Works here tonight. And then we'll end up with a Q&A. So with that, we have a lot to cover. I'm going to hand it right back to Erica Olson, except for one slide I'd ask her to show. And that slide has to do with, I just wanted to refresh your memory, in addition to the purpose of our meeting, but the fact that we have had 2 previous sessions. The first one was last February. The very last one was in May. And then here we are tonight in October. And we're trying very much to keep the public engaged and involved in this issue so that you have the latest information, and the information has good documented sources, and that you are involved in the decision making. So with that, Erica, I'll turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Again, my name is Erica Olson. I'm your facilitator today. To reinforce what Councilmember Dewar just mentioned, all of the information from the previous community meetings, as you can see there on the screen, is found at reno.gov/horses. I will go there towards the end of the meeting, but just to note, there's several hundred questions that have been asked and answered that you will find on that site, as well as the previous recordings from the 2 informational sessions. So check that out. We are here today to cover some new information, as well as probably recap a little bit of what you heard before, just so everybody's up to speed on all of the work that's been done related to this issue. So with that, let me just talk a little bit about how we're going to spend our time. Again, the purpose of these sessions has been the same, to discuss community-informed solutions to reducing accidents between vehicles and horses. That is the purpose. We are here to co-create solutions with the community, and that's what we've done over the past several sessions. You'll see that. And then today we get to share some of the work that's been completed and some that's in process or being considered. So you'll hear about that as well. My role is to facilitate. I will be pulling in questions from the Q&A. I'll show you where that is in just a second, as well as if you want to raise your hand and come in live, I'll show you that as well. Please do ask your questions concisely. It makes it a little bit easier for all of us to answer them, as well as provide your perspective and your solutions as well. You noted the meetings being recorded, as well as all of the chats too, as you would expect. We're doing a little intro right now just to get ourselves up to speed on how we're going to spend our time and how to work together during the time that we have. We've got about 30 to 45 minutes of information to share with you. Again, as I mentioned, if you have questions as we're going through, I will interject them topically if possible. If there's a lot, we'll wait till the end, but we will do our level best to answer all of the questions. If we don't answer your question, we commit to getting you an answer offline through answered FAQs that will be distributed to everybody that's on the list to receive information about this topic. So if you're here and you signed up for this meeting, you're on the list. So anyways, horse education is going to be our first topic, and we'll learn a little bit about horse behavior and some other information that is helpful to for all of us just to understand what's going on with horses, which is going to be awesome. Then you'll hear proposed solutions that have been enacted or are being considered in 3 topical areas: fencing, feeding, and speeding. Those 3 topical areas are based on all of the feedback from all of you over the past, actually probably year and beyond. And those are the topics we've really been working through. So that's why they're bucketed that way. And then again, we'll jump into live Q&A at the end. About 90 minutes for the whole time we have together. Here's our panelists. I'm not going to introduce everybody right now, but as council members you were mentioned, we've got quite a few folks from the City of Reno here with us, as well as folks from the Wild Horse Campaign and Wild Horse Connection and NDOT. So that's the composition of our panel. Again, I'll introduce them when we get there.
Eric, I think it's important too. A lot of times when I participate in these kind of seminars, I always wonder, well, how many people are on with us? Is it 2 or 100 or 300? And I think today we have over 70 participating, and that's good information. So people just know there's a lot of interest in this topic.
Thank you so much. I always think everybody can see that. And with Zoom webinar, you can't see that. So thank you. That's right. 70 and counting. So with that in mind, as the previous community sessions, we are here to share information, but we're also here to listen. So here's how you can engage. If you would like to live jump in and say something, again, ask a question or share a suggestion or an idea, you'll see the raise the hand. That will let us know that you have something to say. We will bring you in that Q&A time that's after we go through the presentation. So that's that. Please do limit your comments to 3 to 4 minutes and be succinct with your question or your input. It's helpful for all of us. And then there's the Q&A. You can see the Q&A there as well. That's the other option you have. Please, again, ask a question there. You can upvote someone else's question or comment. So that's really helpful for us. It's kind of like liking something that lets us know that there's some energy behind that topic. So it helps us prioritize if we've got a lot of questions. And then just some quick rules of engagements. Be concise. I already said that a couple of times. Be considerate and respectful. These are tough topics. We are all here today because we care deeply about our community, both the residents and the animals, the wildlife, and our environment. So we're here to balance all of that in our growing community. Listen and be heard. We're here to hear all perspectives, of course. So I already mentioned what's going to happen with unanswered questions. Again, it's possible we can't get through all of them. We will answer them and distribute them through FAQs as well. After the fact, as I mentioned, through the email distribution. So with that, we're going to jump into our first topic, and that is horse education. I'd like to introduce Tracy from the Wild Horse, where there you went. Well, from the American Wild Horse Campaign, Tracy Wilson, thank you for being here. I'll pass the mic to you. Take it away.
We're just doing a little basic horse education on how the horses on the range sort of form their families and that type of thing. So go ahead and, so we hear a lot, is it a band? Is it a herd? What are these groups of horses that roam around on the range called? And so a band is what we consider a family unit. And when we have an area that there are several bands or more than several bands in a certain area, together those make up a herd. So we have a herd here in the Damani Ranch area up in the hills. We have another one maybe down at Washoe Lake or over in Stagecoach, but we call those herds. Those are larger groups made up of multiple families of horses. The family band usually consists of a band stallion. He's the protector. He wards off challenges by other stallions, other threats to the band. He also has breeding rights to the mares in the band. He's the boss man. And then the band will usually have a lead mare. That lead mare, she's the one that's actually making most of the decisions on when it's time to go to water, when it's time to rest, when it's time to move on, where they're going to go to graze. She's also can be seen on alert and warning the rest of the band if there's a perceived danger in the area. They are very protective of their bands, and you'll often see that one lead mare's head up out front, and then she warns the rest of the band when something's coming in. And then beyond those, there's often other mares in the band. Some bands have just two horses. It would just might be just one stallion and one mare. Others might have a stallion and several mares. Those mares typically, those female horses, they stick pretty close together. Colts and fillies, those are the male and female offspring. The males will generally get pushed out of the band at 2 to 3 years old as they mature. They'll often spend several years with other bachelors. They form what we call bachelor bands, and they do all their own fun stuff, practicing to learn to be a stallion. They're actually quite entertaining to watch on the range if you're lucky enough to see them sparring and practicing. Fillies are often allowed to be stolen by other stallions, moving on to join a new family band, and that is just nature and how they diversify their genetics. Some bands will also have a lieutenant stallion, and he actually will sometimes do a lot of the fighting to ward off other stallions. So his role sometimes is protection, and occasionally also gets breeding rights. In this photo, you can see that's the lead mare out front. She's leading the band. The stallion with his head up in the back is bringing up the rear. That's a really common sight to see. You'll often see that lead mare out front with the stallion bringing up the rear in the back. And he's often moving young ones along, or you'll see the young ones sort of sandwiched between some of the other mares in the band. So we thought we'd just throw in some fun facts about some of the Virginia range horses and their behaviors. So this is called a Flemen Response. We get a lot kick out of some of these pictures because they make such a funny face when they're doing this, but it's actually horses and other animals too have an auxiliary scent organ. It's up in the roof of their mouth, and when they curl that upper lip up like that, exposing their teeth, they're actually enhancing that scent so they can explore what that scent is, whether it's something of interest or something they like, don't like, but it's giving them information about that scent. And then the sparring I mentioned with the bachelors. Certainly you can see horses who fight, but often what you'll see is these horses sparring, and they're up on their hind feet, they're pawing at each other, they're nipping at each other's legs, biting at each other. And really it's just sparring. They're practicing their skills. They're learning to be stallions that are strong enough to go after mares and develop their own family bands. And sometimes this will go on for several minutes and it looks very intense, and then they just stop and they walk off and they go graze together. Horses can often be seen in physical contact with each other, especially at rest. This can be to help ward off flies in summer, share body heat in winter, but really They do it a lot to just express their deep connection to one another. If you spend some time and just watch how that band interacts on the range, you'll see that they spend a lot of time touching each other in various ways. And that physical contact is how they express between themselves. I just want to thank our contributors. We have some wonderful photographers out there on the range who take some really great photos that help contribute to all those photos you just got to see.
That was great. Thank you, Tracy. That was fun. We really appreciate that, and helpful to understand. Yeah, helpful understand horse behavior, right? Perfect. We're going to move to fencing, and then we'll come back to Tracy and Karina in just a minute as well. But I just want to comment. So Jim asked a question for all of us to consider as we're thinking about our presentations, and I'm just going to read it out loud for everybody. So, what are we doing to deal with the issue, the wild horse issue, as our community continues to develop in the South and the East? It seems like we're discussing issues that are going to continue to get worse. So what are we doing to plan for this? And so I think just as all of our panelists walk through the presentations, if you could just keep that in the back of your mind, I think that is the kind of headline question, really, that all of these community meetings are intending to answer, knowing that it's multifaceted and there isn't just one solution, or one approach as well. So Jim, thank you for that, and please, we're gonna keep working on making a fine point on what the approach is. So with that, there are three specific areas that everybody is working on, fencing, that we've all been working on based on the feedback and the concerns. And so fencing is one of the solutions, and we have a few folks, John Flansburgh from the City of Reno, Brooke Oswald from the City of Reno as well, and Tara Schmaltz from NDOT. If you would all, I see you all, turn your cameras on, thank you so much. We're going to walk us through areas of things we've worked on, things that are in consideration. With that, Brooke, take it away.
Great, thank you, Erica. My name is Brooke Oswald. I am a planner with the City of Reno and the Development Services. A large portion of what I do in that is work with private landowners and developers to move forward and help them through our code, our ordinance, the implementation of that, and look at that development of land. In looking at the Virginia range, I've been involved in a number of the projects along this range over the last several years, and continuing, as we're learning and growing, continuing to apply new things. But I think some of the biggest things that to get over as we look at this map, about halfway in that map, you can see a blue dotted line. That's the City of Reno boundary. And then the red line is the Washoe County boundary. A large portion of that's a portion of the Virginia range. Up at the top of that, you can see a large green portion about the middle top. That is federal land that we're seeing. That's roughly around Steamboat and Veterans Parkway, or Talus Valley Development would be what that portion is. And then we're seeing a large portion down at the bottom of the screen, and that would be more up towards Virginia City, past Geiger Grade in that area. So as we look at that Virginia range, a large portion of that Virginia range is private land. And so that is a huge, working with those private landowners and that development is a huge portion of what we're doing as a city. Now that dashed area in between the city boundary and that's our sphere of influence. And that's an area where the city has jurisdictional, it's not within the city boundary, but we do still have our jurisdictional right within that area. So looking at those public lands, as I described, that up by Steamboat and those, and there can be some confusion on this. Although those are public lands or federal lands, they're not herd management areas. Now, herd management areas are specific to the Wild Horse and Burro Act, and those areas where we'll see wild horses, or that term wild horse. The horses on this area are under the control of the Nevada Department of Agriculture. So next slide, please.
Sorry, Brooke, I'm just going to interrupt for a second. Can you just clarify what for myself and probably for folks that are keenly looking at this map? So when you speak about the areas that are not within the jurisdiction outside of the red dotted line, is that correct, out here?
Yes, good question, Erica. Yes, so that would be Story County. That is still the Virginia range. But that is outside of one, Washoe County, and then two, that jurisdictional area where the city of Reno has worked. So we're largely working along that dotted blue line where we're seeing developments coming in, and that's where we're working with developers along that area.
Okay, everybody. And so the dotted blue line is right in here where my mouse is moving along. All right. And then the hash is really the area that is your SOI, your sphere of influence.
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
And this next map, so this is looking further south, and I'll can talk to this a little bit, but this is really a proposed fence where we're looking, but Tara and John will have more information on this. You can see the squiggly line to the right there, that's Geiger grade. And these are really a proposed fence line and what we're looking at in that area. So although we have a lot of that public land, working with NDOT and where their crosses are, and through some of the other areas to start to establish basically a fence line on that southern portion. We'll go to the next slide.
Is the green, right, Brooke?
Yes, it's the green, correct.
Perfect.
So some of the things I've recently been working on is Canyon's Edge fencing proposal. It was a recent development that came in. It was expanding a already existing PUD, adding about 8 acres, 8 homes. But with that, we're really concerned about that fence, the establishment of that fence boundary, and looking at some of the gates, fences, access, public access, and some of that along there. Something that's unique about that is the developer really came forward with that and had some verbal commitments to the advocates. A lot of those associated with providing areas that they could do diversionary feeding, making sure that we have cross access trail areas that those horses can move to and from where they need to go, and some other commitments related to that. That same developer also had a smaller, about an 8-acre site in close proximity to that Canyon's Edge, just above Damani Ranch High School there, where we implemented some new fencing and gate standards that I'll go over in a little bit, and some of these new requirements. And then, as I mentioned, what we do have under consideration are some of those wildlife crossings at Geiger grade, continuing to work on those. There's many stakeholders and many factors in that. And then looking at that joint fencing program in South Reno that we showed on the map there. Next slide. Go ahead.
I don't know if this now, that's okay. Now this time talking about, but Tina is asking if the city is working with other jurisdictions such as Story County, et cetera. So to the extent that now's the time to mention that, or later when you can.
Yeah, and I think that John and Tara can speak to that more. A lot of what I do is that private development or the private landowners is largely what I'm working with.
You got it. We'll come back to that then.
If I may, Erica, I just wanted to mention that I am working with the Story County Commissioner, Clay Mitchell, who covers this basic area from the Virginia City kind of area south or west and south. And so there is some coordination there. And we, of course, have been coordinating with Washoe County over time and with the state. So I think there is a fair amount of coordination going on.
Thank you. Perfect. Awesome. Back to you, Brooke.
Just we'll give a couple updates. So one of the biggest things that we have faced in establishing the fence line along the private property is the vandalism that we're seeing. We're seeing fence lines cut, tremendous damage to gates, and the other structures not closing the gates, running through the gates. So Talus Valley, which is the would be maybe known as the Daybreak development, their southeast portion of their site, they had moved forward to fence that site and provide the gates and stuff, and have had ongoing troubles with trying to maintain the fence line and gates. They are what they have proposed to the city is coming through in the communication that we've established both with the advocates and the developers now at this point, to really find a solution to this temporary thing that we're seeing with vandalism. So I spoke with the developer today, and they just completed it with sort of the good graces of the advocates and the checkoff from them to make sure that the horses were safe. What they are is they made everything safe, have removed some of the fence areas, have covered the grates with large metal plates and put dirt over that, taking the gates off to provide that safety to the horses and to reduce the vandalism. And then as they move forward to the development and they have more people and have activated out there, they will reestablish that fence line and that gate for that safety. So we do have another fence line that does sit up against past this property that provides that protection into the local neighborhoods. Additionally, Rio Wrangler, we have kind of a hot spot on it, which is the terminus of Rio Wrangler. In South Meadows area there. We've had also a tremendous amount of vandalism and other things in that. But recently we had some vandalism, some flooding issues in that area. The cattle guard had been filled in, and our great team from the city, in working with the advocates and Council Member Jor, we've got that cleaned up, the post reestablished, the fence back up, and making sure that we're maintaining and keeping that area safe. I do have one more slide just showing some of where we're moving on just some of the gates, and we're continuing to learn and move through this, and what we're seeing is that great communication with the developers, advocate, and the city to really try to find some of the best solutions as we move forward and continue that fencing program and continue working with those private developers on the fencing. I think some of the exciting things that we are seeing is looking at when development comes in, that we're providing pedestrian gate through. Now, these aren't actually gates where they can be open or closed. We're not worried about that, but someone can go in, move through this, and a pedestrian can pass through without actually having to go over a cattle guard or leave a gate open. Additionally, we're looking at our potential gate or our gate designs, really beefing those up with a lot of reflective flashing and signage and other things, and making sure they're posted and really solid in there to help prevent some of that gate through and vandalism we're seeing. And then definitely when we know where we have horses are moving through, is providing those access points that the horse advocates can do their job that they do so well and help to move those horses back up on the range. So with that, I conclude the fencing portion.
All right, and I just, John Flansburgh, I just want to highlight the good work that Brooke's been doing here, especially on these standards. And to Jim's question that he was asking about what the city's doing in the south and east as this development is occurring, a lot of it is going on here. It's that direct interaction with the developers as they look to develop, and how we can make sure that we have our fence lines in place. Of course, we're going to be covering some of the feeding discussion, and feeding includes watering. And so I think there's some good information there. And then just back on that southern portion of it, working with NDOT, working with Washoe County, we've got, obviously the fence plan has a lot of properties that are a lot of private properties that we have to go through. And we have to make sure that we have a really good coordinated plan, because we have to have the continuous fencing. It doesn't do us any good to have fencing in one area and not have it be continuous. So we have breaks, here and there and everywhere. So just appreciate the good work here that Brooke has been doing and with the developers, and just wanted to clarify with Jim's question.
Awesome. Thank you for that, John. Super. Tara, anything to add before we move on to the next topic from
Sure,
NDOT?
just shortly, Tara Smalls with the Nevada Department of Transportation, and just kind of echoing what John Flansburgh said. Just if this were to move forward, just knowing just how many stakeholders there are, not only on the developer side, but as mentioned earlier with Story County, and NDOT realizing that it's a partner in this as well, and just knowing that it needs to be a united effort for it to move forward. So to ensure that before we can move forward with some of these concepts, just how big of a task it would be, and the need for everyone to come forward and work together, and we're aware of that. We have Geiger grade State Route 341 is a vital piece in that.
Awesome. And just to clarify, Tara, you're speaking specifically about this proposed fencing plan that is the cross-jurisdictional, cross-agency collaboration.
Yes, thank you for elaborating on that. Yeah, we're just one piece of the puzzle, just with the Geiger grade there.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much. We will move on to our next topic, and that would be feeding. I'm going to ask Tracy to come back, and Karina Vance from the Wild Horse Connection is also with us. Karina, thank you for being here. Take it away.
So we'll go ahead with the feeding.
You know what, Karina, I'm going to interrupt you. Your audio is definitely not working. Tracy,
are you good?
Can you?
See if Tracy can handle it.
We can hear you now.
Let's try it. Let's try for 5 seconds. Say hi again.
Okay, are we good? Are we?
I don't think so. We are not good. We are not good. Oh, we can see your smiling face, but we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Tracy, not very well. I think it might be best if Tracy takes it over. Tracy, are you okay with that?
Sure. You could try turning your video off and see if just the audio will work, but I'm happy to.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Let's try it.
Okay. So this is just a reminder that it is illegal to feed wild horse connection. We hold, nope. Okay.
Tracy, I think you better take it over.
Okay, I'll try to do my best. One thing, we want to make sure everybody is aware that it is illegal to feed the horses. We see a lot of good intentions. People want to feed them treats, carrots, apples, grass clippings. All those things are not only encourage the horses to come back into areas they shouldn't be, but it also puts them at risk for choke and colic, which are very painful issues that can come up when they're eating something they're not used to. So we really encourage people, please do not feed those horses. Diversionary feeding is something that is done with approval of the Department of Agriculture in certain areas to divert the horses' patterns and try to change where they were moving back to somewhere safer. Those sites have to be reviewed by the NDA. They're starting to push those back a half mile from roads and structures, or approve specific ones on a case-by-case basis. We're trying to move them back to the hills. One of the problems we have is that without fencing, there's a lot of green yards, green grass on the side of roadways, and those just make an easy meal this time of year when they have to walk a little farther and work a little harder to go get a meal out on the range. So they're just choosing the easy path. It's the path of least resistance. That's how they survive. So there's a lot of signage that's been put up both by Wild Horse Connection in some areas and by the City of Reno in some areas, reminding people of that law and not to feed the horses and that it can be dangerous. You'll see those, and then there's another black one that goes up in certain areas by Wild Horse Connection as well. So the brown sign you see there also has the Wild Horse Hotline on it, which is a 24/7 number. If you see an injured horse or a sick horse or a horse somewhere that it's in danger, that number can be called to alert the range management team, who can call volunteers to deal with those issues. And then this was my slide, so back to me. So American Wild Horse Campaign has the cooperative agreement for fertility control on the Virginia range. From the preliminary analysis from January to June, which encompasses the peak foaling period of the year, we had a 61.4% reduction in births from 2020 to this year, 2022. We hold a mortality rate on the range that sits at 50% plus or minus, looking at foals born through about 15 months of age. Most of that is due to predation. We do have mountain lions on the range, and that's nature's balance. One very important piece is that from Hidden Valley to Geiger Grade, the horses that range in that area, we have started to see population decrease. This is a hot area of conflict because of development in horses. So decreasing the horses in that area, meaning that we see more deaths from age, illness, whatever the case may be, than births. That is actually starting to decrease the population in that higher conflict area. So, we are seeing progress in the fertility control program.
And Tracy, could you said it, but will you just remind everybody that's on at the meeting today, your role and also Karina's role with the Wild Horse Connection in context of this.
Yes,
this
so
work.
I'm the Nevada State Director for American Wild Horse Campaign. Like I said, we hold the cooperative agreement for fertility control on the range. Karina is the president of Wild Horse Connection, and they hold the cooperative agreement with the Department of Agriculture for range management, which includes things like rescue, diversionary feeding, all types of other issues that outside of fertility control, they handle it all.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just asked a quick question. Let's answer it if we can. Right now, total head count on the Virginia range, if you know.
I believe at our last official count that we reported, it was around 3,200.
And then Mark is asking if the 61% is based on a sample.
Nope, we have a database that every horse on the range that we have accessed has been recorded in that database. We record births, deaths. Every horse is identified by their color, markings, area, unique features, and that percentage actually was up until just to kind of put it in perspective, we recently got into a pocket that we hadn't been able to get into before. There was only one foal in that area, so that means that reduction rate is still about accurate because we did not discover a bunch of new foals that we didn't know about.
Awesome. Super. Tracy, thank you so much. And Karina, thank you, because we know that you were ready to present that. So we know that you're here with us. So thank you so much for that, all that great information. We're going to move along to speeding, another important topic. And I just asked for Travis, Kurt, and John to please turn to be here with us with your cameras on. Thanks so much. Good to see you all. Kurt will be leading us off with this topic. Kurt, go right ahead.
Good evening. As mentioned, Kurt Dietrich, City Traffic Engineer for Reno. Next slide, please. So if everyone remembers, a couple years ago, whenever we had the population of horses coming into our roadways at certain times of year, we would place the changeable message signs. And so when we did that, if you recall, we would place them, unfortunately, in the bicycle lanes, in turning lanes, parking lanes, and would actually be in the roadway. So a couple years ago, we decided to go ahead and put in advanced warning signs for the horses to warn motorists that horses may be in the roadway. So working with the Wild Horse Connection, we identified 9 locations throughout the South Meadows area, which includes Carrot, Rear Wrangler, and Veterans. And those are edgelit signs that can be seen at night. Going directly into the speeding, we did do a speed study on Veterans Parkway, did determine that it was posted correctly at 45 miles an hour. However, we did place 4 radar feedback signs to remind motorists of their speeds. Next slide, please. One of the advantages of the speed radar signs is it does collect data. And so last week we did pull the data. And so from our 4 locations, the southbound direction, the north, we had an 85th percentile of 48 miles per hour. And the south location, 47. Northbound on the south end, we had 44 miles per hour. And we had a slightly elevated reading of 51 miles an hour for the north side of the northbound Veterans Parkway with that speed data. So traffic engineers essentially look at a 5-mile differential. If it's within 5 miles of the posted speed limit, it doesn't really bring any red flags, so to speak, but this one is slightly elevated. Next slide. So as far as completed in progress actions that we've taken, as mentioned, we did complete the South Veterans Parkway speed study and did determine that it was posted correctly at 45 miles per hour. And as previously mentioned, we did install 4 speed radar feedback signs. Actually, several years ago on Rear Wrangler and Steamboat, the speed limits were lowered from the original 45 to 35. The city has also done social media campaigns and outreach on the dangers of speeding. And currently we're looking at the possibility of adding a split daytime, nighttime speed limits. The federal government does allow us to do so, but we're just currently researching if that's allowed or currently in practice in Nevada. Thank you much.
Kurt, that was great. I just want to ask Travis, John, anything to add to Kurt's presentation?
I think Kurt covered it all very well. So thank you, Kurt.
I have a follow-up question for Kurt, and I think it's just worth reemphasizing, Kurt. You mentioned about the northbound, I believe, was exceeding the 85th percentile. There was a portion. So what is our plan to address that? Could you go over that again?
As far as the speed radars, they do collect data as previously mentioned. And what's really cool about the data collection is it's actually timestamped by day and time. So we're able to forward that to RPD so they can pinpoint if there's any enforcement opportunities.
Okay. And I think at least I heard someone within the city mention that they were going to be looking at this section of road that seems to have excessive speed. Maybe our RPD representative might want to address that.
Yes, we do, and working with our traffic division, continue to have directed enforcement and observation in the areas of Rear Wrangler, Steamboat, and Veterans Parkway.
So, I mean, one of the questions that I'm often asked by residents who aren't as technically astute as Mr. Dietrich about the 85th percentile and so on, a lot of them feel it's their perception that people are speeding. And so I guess I would ask Sergeant Garlock again, just how often are these areas patrolled, or is there any desire or interest to increase patrols in this area? Maybe you could just address that.
Yes, I don't have how often they are. I know we have our motor units, our traffic units who are dedicated to this area, and they patrol it on a routine basis. However, as far as their directed service, I would have to pull those to find out exactly how many requests they've serviced down in this area, but they're down here on a daily basis.
I think that's comforting to the residents to just know that traffic enforcement is ongoing, and that if there is a spot problem, you would address it, it sounds like, and working closely with our traffic engineering folks.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Dewar, any other follow-on questions related to speeding? And I know this was an important topic.
There were so many questions. So are you going to wait to the very end of all of the presentations and then people can ask their own questions?
Yep. So we just hit that point. So that's the end of the presentations, actually. So we have actually one question that is currently open and unanswered. And then we'll take, of course, other questions as well. But let's just bring our panelists on if we can, please, everybody. And just to recap for a minute, we obviously have Councilmember Dewar, Assistant City Manager Jackie Bryant, John Flansburgh, Regional Infrastructure Administrator, Tracy Wilson, you mentioned Tracy before, Commander Garlock, you just heard him speak from RPD, Travis, Director of Maintenance, Kurt, Traffic Engineer, Brooke, Planner, Tara from NDOT, and Karina from Wild Horse Connection. So that is our panel. We do have a couple of hands up as well. So let's jump there first. If you wouldn't mind, IT, if you would please bring in our panel, or excuse me, our participant who has a hand up, and we'll take your question as soon as you're with us. Mark, there you are. Mark, we can see your hand up and you're now off mute. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much. And thank you also to all the presenters. I think you've all done a fantastic job, and I very much appreciate the intention of having this open discussion. I looked at the Virginia Range Horse Frequently Asked Questions page, and my question is answered there, but I'm finding the answer a little bit insufficient. So I wanted to push a little, and specifically with respect to sterilization or population or herd management. I mean, I was happy to see that slide on the 61% reduction, but I mean, the 3,200 population is not static in any particular area. Obviously, their range is large and they roam. So my real question is, what is the intention behind trying to manage the entire population of, let's say, 3,200 to mitigate the risk that it becomes, double or triple within a short period, say 4 or 5 years? And I see the question is basically, how are we trying to solve the cause as opposed to addressing perhaps the symptom, relying on predation or PZP and the difficulties associated with that. Thank you.
Mark, thank you so much. Tracy,
I'm
would you
not
like to take that?
Yeah, I'll take a stab, and I'm not sure if I'm answering your question or not, Mark, but the goal of fertility control is we pretty much stabilize the population, or moving towards stabilization. In the City of Reno border, we're actually reducing population. The overall goal is of course population reduction while keeping the horses on the range. It's more humane than roundups. It's more humane than putting horses in a livestock auction where they're going to get sent, likely bought and shipped to slaughter. So if we can keep the horses on the range, reduce the population, and we'll also be looking at some range projects to improve the conditions on the range as well, as a holistic view rather than just looking at just horse population. Obviously, we need to match horse population with range conditions and development, but we also need to look at some of these long-standing fire areas that have not been rehabbed and looking at doing some work there and making it better for all wildlife, not just horses, but all the wildlife on the range. We use PZP, which you mentioned, which is not a sterilant at this point. It is reversible. And we track all those treatments and we know what mares have contributed to the gene pool, which mares haven't. So all that information is tracked, and we actually have a data analysis being done in a partnership with the University of Pretoria in South Africa that does some PZP work with elephants, and their people have also done wild horse fertility control as well. So we've got some good study material on the horizon coming out as well.
Mark, does that answer your question about getting to the root cause?
It does, and I think maybe the question I'm asking is unanswerable, because I guess where I'm really going with it is, what is the right population size? Is it 3,200? Is it 1,500? And as I listen, to the discussion, I see an undercurrent emphasis that relates to development. Obviously development's important, and you don't want conflict with horses and people as developments grow. But I just see this as an open question. Maybe there isn't an answer, but I'm trying to get my arms around what's the right population. And selfishly, because I live in an area in Steamboat where, it seems like the herd's getting bigger, it's not getting smaller, and the population in total may be the same, but maybe they're all kind of coming over here, and it does impact us. I would be lying if I said it didn't, but I'm not a horse hater, just don't like the consequences of having them ranging freely through the area. So I'm kind of rambling here, but maybe it's an unanswerable question, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. But it would be nice if we thought about what is the goal? Is it a 3,000? Are we at that number? Is that the number we want as development increases, or do we want a smaller number? Acknowledging no one wants to send the horses to the south to be processed, as dog food. I get that.
I think that I answered that in that our goal is reduction. I don't think we can give you a hard number. I think that number is fluid based on conditions as they develop.
Okay, I'll accept that.
Mark, thank you so much. Actually very well put. And Tina was asking a similar question. So Tina, that's the answer to your question as well. So Tracy, thank you so much. Again, the balance on all of these issues is exactly what we're finding and needing to find. So Mark, thank you for that. Tina, thank you as well. I do believe we have another hand up. IT, if you wouldn't mind bringing them in as well. Jim, thank you, Jim, for asking your question at the beginning as well. We all see it up there at the top, but I see you're off mute. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Erica. I kind of wanted to put a little bit more specificity to my original question. So I live out in Steamboat Valley, and it's an interface area with wild horses and domesticated horses. I live out there because I used to have quite a bit of access to the Virginia range and everything, which is slowly but surely going away. And so my question about development is, you know, you are now dealing with an issue in DeMonte Ranch that wasn't an issue until you developed it, right? And so now you have a wild horse conflict with the development. And what I'm asking is, as you plan your future development, as you move south, because Reno has looked into annexing parts of the Steamboat Valley, are you taking that into consideration? Because we kind of like it the way it is. I don't have a problem with the wild horses. They come through the street in front of my house almost daily. I have no problem with that. My horses don't have a problem. They get excited about it, but my horses don't have a problem with it. The other horses out there don't seem to have a problem with it. We're careful when they're there. But what are you doing about these areas that are currently interface areas with the wild horses and your future plans for development? That's where I'm going with this. I want to know, are you actively thinking about this as you make future, and this is probably a city council question, but I think it should be a Washoe County question also. That's the
Jim, I can take a stab. There's no perfect answer to what you're asking, but it's a pretty complicated question. But here's the bottom line. Currently, the city's sphere of influence goes down to an area called Rhodes Road, which isn't all the way down into what you're referring to as Steamboat Valley. Maybe you're also referring to Pleasant Valley. But those are the current boundaries of our sphere of influence. And so if the city was to annex, that's about as far south as they would go. That's a pretty hard line at this point in time. The other area, our sphere goes all the way up, we discussed, up to Story County line. So we could annex all the way up to the hill, which right now those areas are in the county. In terms of what we are doing, because I think your basic question was really the best question, what we are doing a couple of years ago, the city council, and probably much because of my residents and myself, began to look at adding conditions to permits so that as developments occurred, the horses would be managed as we go forward. And so one of those conditions has to do with fencing. There are actually about 8 conditions that relate to fencing, horse guards, having monitored gates during construction so that gates aren't left open during construction, which is one of the big issues with, especially with rock trucks and so on, things like that. So there are these 8 conditions. I know that Brooke could get into them because he helped draft them in conjunction with Tracy Wilson. It actually came through on an appeal of a project, and those conditions were worked out. And then the city council adopted those conditions when we did our Title 18 update so that those would be permanent. What the goal is now is to see, do we need to modify those or add any other kind of conditions to deal with other evolving situations? So that is the purpose of these workshops, is to keep everyone informed and to get the community thought process going. The second thing is that when you've got to realize that the developments such as Double Diamond, the PUD was approved at around 1995. The DeMonte Ranch PUD, I believe, was approved in 2007. And that is quite a while back. And at those times, we didn't have those fencing conditions. We, as you pointed out, those developments didn't exist until they were approved. And so the conflicts weren't there at that time. There were conflicts still up in Hidden Valley that had already been developed to some degree. So as we go forward with every single development, our staff look at what kind of impacts do they expect, what kind of conflicts with the range do they expect, and they add specific conditions that would really come from what we call our master plan. In our master plan, we speak about the principles that we want to have at the city and the issues that should be addressed as development occurs. And then there's one final thing, and I'm not exactly sure how this will play out, but last session, the legislature adopted a law, and it said that at interface areas, which these are areas between the urban and the wildland interface, that NDOW would be involved in evaluating impacts to any kind of wildlife. And that is a brand new condition. It went into place effective, to my knowledge, January 1st. So it's just been in effect for a few, maybe 9 months or so, still sorting out how that works. And I don't know at our planning and our development department how they're working with that requirement. But horses are still wildlife, they fall under that umbrella. So just to summarize, I've shared a lot of information, but just to summarize, we have requirements in our regulations that control development. We have staff that analyze the potential impacts of development. And then we have new laws coming in and new ordinances at the same time. And then finally, and we're going to discuss it, and we have discussed it a bit, is our fencing project proposal. So I mentioned that some of the developments came in much earlier. And for example, down in Curdy Ranch. In Curdy Ranch, when that was being developed, we didn't have these kind of requirements in place. And so what is happening is the horses are coming in through the Curdy Ranch area. And then it becomes, well, whose responsibility is it? And that's why I think we've jointly taken on this responsibility with a multiple agency approach. There's funding becoming available to the Nevada Department of Agriculture to work on fencing. And we have great partners in NDOT, the county, and Story County. And so we have identified a potential fencing path. And so what we're really trying to do is the new ones are being taken care of. The old ones, we're going back and having to rehabilitate or renovate or readdress the issues. And so Tracy here is very involved in the issue of identifying where the gaps in fencing are and making sure those get closed off. Hopefully that answered, the level of detail that you were looking for.
Somewhat, and it was very good. Thank you very much. I don't know how to call you. I'm just going to call you Councilmember Naomi because that's all I can see on the screen.
Sure, that's great.
But
Naomi works fine too.
Okay, but I just wanted to make 2 more comments, and you don't have to answer the question, but I have 2 suggestions. Number 1, I personally feel roads too far south for a development line for Reno. And number 2 is whatever development that you decide is okay out in the Steamboat area, it would be really beneficial to everybody concerned, especially with us with horses that would wish to have legitimate access to the Virginia range so that we can go right out there if we want, which is slowly but surely being closed off. If you can maintain that access somehow during your planning efforts, I would really personally would appreciate it. And I'm sure there's others that would also. And that's the end of my comment.
If you would indulge me just for 1 minute, I would like to just address this last point. Right along with this concept of fencing and development is continuing access to the great outdoors, as you point out.
Right.
However, most of the Virginia range, as has already been discussed, is private land. So what I've been working on is a outdoor recreation corridor that could be used for I'm having a dog issue over here. It's time for treats. So I'm sure everyone on this call can understand that. We'll see what we can do about that. But anyway, what we're doing is looking at how to allow access. And so what I'm personally doing is working with the private landowners and our nonprofits, and hopefully starting in November, and looking at where should this open corridor go? Where's the best location? And how would we get there? So there are funds available at the federal level, the state level, and there's other funding sources for these kind of corridors. And I'm really pleased to hear you talk about it. And I'd love to engage you offline in discussing how we move forward with that project.
I would be eternally grateful for that. Thank you very much.
Okay, you bet.
Jim, thank you so much. We have 3 folks that have their hands up and a few questions in chat as well. So I'm just going to take one from chat for a minute. And then while I'm doing that, IT, if you wouldn't mind bringing in the next individual that has their hand raised. So Jennifer is asking, why is the gate at the diversionary feeding site at the top of Willamette Road left open by WHC volunteers? The horses are coming down into the neighborhood and onto Rhodes Road. I see that the horses are not to be fed within 2,600 feet of homes. My home is within 2,600 feet of the site.
I will take a stab because I know Karina's audio is not working really well. One, as I said on the previous slide, it's half mile or case by case basis. So, you know, they take a look at the whole situation in the area that's being requested and consider it based on that. As far as the gate, we can certainly check into that. I don't do diversionary feeding, but I've been up there on rescue several times. I've never encountered a gate being closed. And as far as horses on Rhodes Road, horses have been on Rhodes Road for decades. And it's, if they don't go down that road, they'll go down another way. There's lots of ways down from the hill, and the horses know all of them. So Rhodes Road, Steamboat Valley is a place that horses have been for decades. And so that's, you know, where we come into, it is a fence out state. I know there are some newer residents in that area that have bought pieces of property and they're building on them. And if they don't want the horses on their land, they are required to fully fence that. Just same as many areas on the range, there's free range cows. And in fact, we had somebody with apparently free range pigs on their property recently. And it is quite literally a fence out state. If you don't want the animals on your property, it's got to be fenced.
I think
Thank
that
you,
point
Tracy.
really deserves to be reinforced, and we really haven't talked about it before this on this meeting. That is why fencing is so important, because of our state laws that say it is the landowner's responsibility. If you don't want animals on your property, you need to fence them out. And that is why, you know, we've been working so carefully on this fencing project. That is why we put the conditions on developers, because we know that the ultimate residents don't want horses on their property. So the only way to achieve that is to fence them out.
Thank you. Awesome. Super. Bob, we see you. Oh, sorry, Tracy, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add one more thing on there, that the fencing, there is a legal definition of a fence in the NRS. There are certain things that can help keep the horses off the property, but actually if you go with the legal fence, you're going to be a lot better off.
Okay, got it. And someone was just asking what the definition of offense is, so that answers your question. Mark has a couple other questions related to this too, but we'll go back, Mark, to you in just a minute. Bob, go ahead. We see you. If you would take yourself off mute, go right ahead.
Thank you so much for the meeting and for taking my question. I'm interested to know if you're seeing any of the horses cross the jurisdictional boundaries, particularly to Carson or to the north, or is this herd pretty consistent on the range? Thank you.
They are pretty
That's
consistent.
for you, Tracy.
Yeah, they're pretty consistent on the range. Once you cross, like in Carson, like say Deer Run Road, that actually goes out to BLM, so that's a different herd. There are the areas that they can still cross is Mound House. Dayton has put in fencing, but there is a underpass and there is an open section with lighting. But that is traditional Virginia range area. As far as to the north, it's pretty well fenced off. We don't have horses going north of I-80 or west of 580. So, and then the eastern portion along 95A is also fenced. So they're fairly well contained on the Virginia range.
Thank you.
It's like some 280,000 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And does cross multiple counties. You said, does it cross jurisdictions? Absolutely. And I want to just give a shout out to NDOT, because what they've done is they've engaged in a project to fence along US 50. And I don't know how far that's gone out. Maybe you could address that, Tracy, but it is very extensive. And the final thing that we haven't talked about here today is that NDOT has stepped forward and offered to work with us on creating an underpass under Geiger grade. And that's a different kind of thing that we haven't talked about. It's not a horse guard, it's not a fence, but it's a different way to channel the horses not just horses, but all wildlife, so that they don't get hit on our roads. So does that answer your questions, Bob?
Yes, thank you so much.
And Councilmember Dewar, I'd just like to add to that. Again, this is Tara Smeltz with the Nevada Department of Transportation. So yes, project was completed, I believe, last summer through the US 50 Dayton area corridor. So there is fencing on the north side, but there are gaps, as was mentioned by Tracy. Mound House, for example, due to development, intersections, access, what have you, knowing that it is a coordinated effort, there are locations where horses may cross US 50, but those are abutted with signage on either side, illuminated like what Kurt had mentioned in his slides, as well as enhanced lighting to try to just bring more attention and make that enhance the safety there. And then Councilmember Dewar did mention the option of the under or over crossing for horses. We do have those in other areas throughout the state for other types of wildlife. And in the scenario here with Geiger Grade, if that were to be pursued with a larger fencing project, it would have to be a cooperative effort with Washoe County, City of Reno, all of the stakeholders that have been mentioned here today, just because we wouldn't want to leave a gap in any way. So it would definitely be a coordinated effort if that were to be pursued by the department. And as everyone's done such a great job here tonight, just explaining how complex it is moving forward to make that a truly feasible, viable, and sustainable option.
Awesome. Thank you, Tara. Super. We have one more hand up. If you wouldn't mind, IT, let's bring in the last person that we have in queue. Hi, Tara. We see you're off mute. Thank you for being here. Go right ahead.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for allowing me a minute. I am new to the area, and one of the things that drew me to the area was the wild horses. And I feel like there's two people in the area. There's those that love them and those that hate them. We have driven slower, we're more cautious, we're more careful because we know that they're all around us. And so I wonder if people have moved into the area not knowing what they're moving into. I feel like it's the horses' land, like we're blessed to be part of it. So I wonder if there's opportunity to, in real estate, put a mandate or a precaution to have people sign off that they know what they're getting into, that they know that the wild horses are in their area, and they know they need to, fence their property if they don't like them. But they also should be aware from a protection perspective, because the horses are going to be down here.
I would like
Tara,
to start
thank you.
answering that, and then there might be others too. First of all, very interesting idea about a disclaimer on real estate. Often disclaimers are used to explain an existing condition or where you're moving into or what to expect. Some people may know if disclaimers are required in this area for any development, and that may even include Brooke. I mean, I believe we've even put conditions that require some kind of disclaimer. But to your other point about love and hate, I think that you're right. I think over the last couple decades, I have met many people that have moved to South Reno because they love the horses and they understand the conditions that they're moving into. More recently, I would say the last 4 years, where a lot of people are moving to Reno, all they want to do is find a house that they can afford and move into and enjoy. And they maybe haven't done quite the level of due diligence that might be required, and they are surprised to find wild horses. And I'll just remind the group that Nevada as a whole has about half of all of the wild horses in America are in Nevada. So we have more than anyone, and we happen to have about 3,000 right here. And so I think that you really are hitting on an important point. But that is why we're trying to carve a centrist path, I guess I would say, a path that reduces the population in an acceptable fashion, that does look at range conditions, that does create safety for our residents from the horses, and keep the horses safe from the residents. all of that. So I think you're raising really good issues, and that's why this is a pretty darn complicated topic. It's just like anything. Think about people moving up to Tahoe and being confronted with bears, or even here in Reno, Nevada, in many areas, block from my house, there are bears. Collin Ranch, there are bears. People didn't necessarily move to Reno and expect an urban environment to be dealing with bears the same way they are up at Tahoe, but yet they are. We have a lot of raccoons. We have a lot of other different kind of animals that can create challenges in different parts of town. Up north, various kinds of deer and other kinds of animals. So it's something, it doesn't matter whether it's, horses, raccoons, bears, whatever. We are here and we have to interface with a wide variety of animals. I'm sure there's someone else who'd like to add something. It looks like Brooke has his hand up.
Yeah, Brooke, go right ahead. And then just as a heads up, we do have quite a few more questions as well. So we're going to keep it moving. Brooke, go right ahead.
I'll move very quickly on this. So we haven't, from a development point of view, we haven't required that a disclaimer been done, but there are numerous things that we have required. So a lot of the development we see along the Virginia Range are planned units developments. Those have a handbook. Within that handbook, we have a wildlife interface that requires that fencing, those gates, and a number of things. So it starts at that very high level of the planned unit development. But what we have done is you see those fences having to be maintained by those HOAs. And so those communities are really invested in the maintenance of that fence, the understanding of the importance and the safety that's required on that. So I think that's one of the important things that we have seen, and that involvement of those neighborhoods with that interface.
Awesome. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Councilmember Dewar. Tara, does that answer your question?
Yes and no. I mean, I think it's something that we should consider, and I appreciate Councilwoman Dewar's response, but I think raccoons are normal, bears are normal, horses are not normal to be known as a wild animal in your area, right? If you move into bear area, you pretty much know it. I just don't think people have a general understanding that horses are wild creatures too.
Thank you. Okay. With that, I'm going to move us to another set of questions. Tina and Vinny, they're somewhat related because they show exactly how complicated this issue is. So Tina's question is, with the current and future development, is wildlife being fenced out from water sources? And then a similar question, or also related to fencing, really. So it sounds like road area, horses have roamed for a long time. Is there any plan to try to keep the horses on BLM land so they do not roam through the neighborhood? So again, fencing, not fencing kind of conversation. Tracy, go ahead.
I can briefly touch on the BLM roaming issue. While yes, on the outside of Steamboat Valley, there is BLM land. If you look at the range as a whole, the amount of BLM land is quite small compared to private property. And it was decades ago that the BLM turned over the management of horses on the Virginia Range to the NDA. So the horses don't know the difference between the private land and the BLM land. There is no way that we can just say, oh, they're only going to be on BLM land, because it's actually, they're not managed by the BLM, they're managed by the NDA, and they do roam the full 285,000 acres of the range, other than private properties of which they are fenced out of.
And I think you also asked about water.
Yes.
Yes. And so I think that is a very key question that at least when we get developments in South Reno that I'm pretty focused on, as well as the Wild Horse Connection, because the animals do need water. The primary water source has been Steamboat Creek. There are other water sources, there are springs or other little streams, but Steamboat Creek has been the primary water source. So as development occurs along Steamboat Creek, we are looking at two main options. One is developing basically manufactured water sources. So think about a corral, a tank that you would use for watering. So that's one option. Another option is keeping certain sections of Steamboat Creek open. And so we are working at the city at both options. So we're working with developers to say, if you block a water source, Where else can you create an alternate water source? We've had a lot of meetings with Tumwa about this, and meetings with Department of Agriculture about this. So these seem to be the key questions. And obviously animals can't live without food and water. And so it's also probably going to come into play. I mentioned that NDOW review that's going to be happening more frequently at these interface areas. They're going to be looking at food and water as well for all animals. And just to Tara's question earlier, I don't really distinguish between this kind of animal or that kind of animal. I'm just saying the animals are here. However they got here, they're here and we have to deal with them. So that's why I didn't really draw a bright line between that. So that might answer your question, but water is definitely being looked at and very important to life.
Perfect. We have two hands up. I know, IT, if you would please bring in the next person. While you're doing so, while we're on the subject, Candace is asking, when will the fencing be installed? And that is a multi-jurisdictional answer.
I'm going to just say this before anyone answers. That's the $1 million question. I call it that because we have yet to identify the actual cost, the cost per section and the actual length of fence needed. That is underway. That data is still being developed. And then number two, who would be the participants either in constructing or funding? So we do not have a time frame at this time. And I asked that same question before this meeting. I said, do we have an answer yet? And we don't. And I think everyone is still struggling, but I would say the experts in the room, at least in this Zoom room, are the folks that end up, because they have installed a tremendous amount of the proper spec'd out fence for many miles. And I think it's really going to take our public works folks working with the counties and working with NDOT to kind of put some dollars around this and look at some appropriate funding sources.
Awesome.
And this is Tara Smaltz with NDOT, and just to highlight, yes, we have done fencing projects in the past, and I think it's mentioned another upcoming question about where we have existing under and over wildlife crossings. Here for the Geiger grade question, as again was really well portrayed earlier in the slides of just how complex this is working with City of Reno, Washoe County, and the understanding that there's so many private properties that are involved here, that really understanding where the fencing should go, what effects would occur if the fencing were to be placed where it was, where will the horses go thereafter if any fencing were to be installed. There's just a lot of questions that have yet to be answered, and that's why working with the City of Reno and Washoe County, trying to understand where that proposed fencing, that their proposed fencing would go, and also with coordination with Wild Horse Connection as well as the Department of Agriculture to really understand what the effects of where these horses would be displaced, where they go thereafter. Would we be displacing them to other roads, to other neighborhoods? All needs to be understood, and NDOT just a small piece in this. I mean, our jurisdiction is the strip of Geiger grade, State Route 341. That is our right of way. That is what we have influence over. And at this point, it is one crossing, and depending how the county and city and all of this moves forward, in coordination with all the stakeholders, including the developers, really has yet to be known before NDOT knows what would be best for our section, under, over crossing, fencing, where to tie into fencing, or where different attractions for horses would lie. I hope that creates a little bit of a better understanding on the department side.
Yes, Tara, thank you. And that does answer, Dawn, your question in relation to the wildlife crossing. I think, to summarize what Tara just said, it's still an exploration. Okay, awesome. I'm just going to do one more other quick thing. Tracy and Karina, if you wouldn't mind looking at Mark's questions that are in Q&A, I'll come back to you in a second. If you could just check those out, so we could have a response back to him. And while you're doing that, Kelly, we see you. If you could take yourself off mute. Thank you for being here.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
So I've been working with the Wild Horse Connection and all the other horse coops and everything for a really long time. And I have just a thought that I'd like to put out there. I know that there's a fencing proposal that we've all been asking for and talking about that basically comes from the existing fence line from Hidden Valley down behind Damani Ranch, behind all of the houses there, and it comes down behind or in front of the gravel pit, which is now Western Skies, but it ties into Geiger Grade and Toll Road, where at one time there was a cattle guard. There's a lot of private property there that comes along Kenyon and BLM. And then originally the thought would have been to go straight down behind Pleasant Valley and around behind the fire station. Now, the thing is if the only part that you're looking at fencing is Geiger Grade, whether it be from the roundabout up to the top at 5 Mile Flats, or just from the roundabout up to the first turn, it will not stop the horses from coming down onto Toll Road, Kivett, Pinion, and into Pleasant Valley. So what really has to happen in reality is we need that fencing that comes along the natural property line from where it stops now, which is about the gravel pit by Damani Ranch High School, down to Toll Road, where there used to be a cattle guard. There could be a new cattle guard there. And then the way they have it now, and I think Tracy has a map up, it would then go west, kind of on Murphy Lane from Toll Road, basically to 395. And that will block the horses from coming into all of these houses and these neighborhoods. And then the fence could continue up Geiger Grade to wherever a wonderful, fabulous overpass could be. May I suggest where it flooded out a few years ago is probably a good place to put one. But really, I feed 100 horses. I'm a legal feeder and I water them, and I do it every day during feeding season, twice a day at 5:30 in the morning and 5:30 at night. And I have a full-time job and I do water, which I'm trying to do right now. But my point is that the 100 and some odd horses that we're doing diversionary feeding on up Toll Road come down here, even if we feed them, because there are people still feeding and watering down here. There are people putting apples in the streets. And can you imagine? And I did send you some pictures today in my email. I'm talking 80, 90, 100 horses on Toll Road that cross Geiger. And we have 30 or 40 of them that are doing it every day. So my thought to you all is, please, I understand it's multi-agency. Have you reached out to the private property owners? That's something that needs to be done. We need a fence sooner than later, or people will die, and we cannot have that. Thank you.
Kelly, thank you. Thank you. I saw a lot of head nods there, and I saw a lot of note taking. So thank you for being here, and thank you for all that you do for the horses as well. I believe we have one more hand up in queue, and we have a couple questions as well that I'd like to make sure we get to in the time that we have remaining. So if you wouldn't mind, IT, bring in the last person that has their hand up. And then Tracy and Karina, I'll go to you related to a couple questions that Mark has, and we'll try to get to the other two that are here as well. Amanda, we see you here. Thank you so much for being here. You're off mute. Please go right ahead.
Hi, thank you. So I recently I joined the Washoe County Leadership Academy, and the academy has been broken up into two project groups. And we met last month, and one of the proposed ideas that we could choose from could be something to help with, the issues that you guys have been discussing today. So this coming Friday, we meet for the next time where we get to pick a project. And so although I can't promise anything, my question really is there something that, a group of Washoe County residents, being the Leadership Academy, could help with? Is there some type of project that I can propose that would be helpful to, this issue and this cause that we might be able to, choose from on Friday?
Wow. Well, that's not a question that we get every day. So Councilmember Dewar, I see that you're off mute. Go right ahead.
Well, I think this requires a little sit down before Friday. If you have to make the decision Friday, then we need to do a little background. Is the group, how many are there in the group? 20 to 30 or 10?
I think each group has 16 or 17. And so we're coming together with, what are our ideas collectively, and then kind of narrowing it down. So we might have more time to actually choose a final project, but it's kind of our first session to kind of think about where do we want to go, you know, with all the various other proposals.
Very similarly, a scout came to me very recently with the same question. You know, both an Eagle Scout and a cadet saying, what kind of project can we do to help the city? And so my suggestion to you, Amanda, rather than take up everyone's time, is that we sit down with Karina, with Tracy, and I'm happy to be part of it, even on a Zoom, and talk through what the issues are and what could be appropriately addressed by your 16 to 17 member team. It depends what your time frame is. Do you have any additional funds? Is it all research that you would be doing on your own? Are you going to raise some funds? Do you want to work with a nonprofit? All of these things, that brainstorming aspect. And I bet if horses is something that you want to help with, I have a feeling there is a project there.
That's awesome. So next steps, Amanda, I think would be to reach out to Councilmember Dewar. Councilmember Dewar.
Yes, I will just give my phone number right now, but my email first, Dewar, DUERRN @reno.gov. So DewarN @reno.gov. And that would probably, let's just go with that. Send me a quick email. We'll make sure you include your phone number. I'll call you back. We'll set up a meeting, hopefully before your time frame of Friday.
Awesome. Okay. Amanda, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tracy, Karina, I'm just kicking it back to you for just a quick second on the comments that Mark has related to the distance in the limited purpose cooperative agreement related to diversionary feeding locations. And Tracy, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm going to quickly address that, and Jennifer's as best I can. Again, everything is taken into consideration, the number of horses, where they're going to go without the diversionary feeding, what areas the land opens up to. Jennifer asked about the amount of feeding, I believe, earlier. That is based on the number of horses, how much conflict there is. So I think my best thing I could say at this point, since we've got some audio issues, if you have further questions, to please reach out to Wild Horse Connection.
Okay, so just to summarize on that, Tracy. So Mark, I think that is specifically also for you as well, to reach out to Wild Horse Connection and Karina to get this issue cleared up. Is that a fair summary, Tracy and Karina? Saw some head nods there. Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. Last question from William related to the use of thermal imaging to alert vehicles to horse presence. Has that been a consideration? And John, I'm thinking, oh, Kurt, no, Kurt, go right ahead. You got off mute fast. Go for it.
Actually, not that I'm aware of, unless John has any additional information on that.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think that technology would be really great if we had a specific place that the horses are always crossing. So we had our sensors set up with some warning signs and things like that. But it is an interesting concept to consider of how we could use that. But obviously, with the thermal imaging, great question, William, because like I said, if we had a certain spot they were doing that and we could set up the sensors for that purpose and have it light up a sign, I mean, that would be, or even some additional lights that might work well. I don't know that we have a specific spot that they're always crossing, but I love the thought.
I will add this. I think we did map where horses were hit. So there probably is some data that there are some areas that are more prevalent. Maybe those are natural crossing areas or areas that lead into developments. And, you know, there is a question, we haven't even addressed it, but that's why are they even going to developments? Often they're going to developments because that's where grass is. That is where easy food is. And so one of the considerations for the city too is, should we limit the use of grass in medians, in open common areas and HOAs in certain areas, not throughout, but maybe at the front or back end. But I think the fencing is the ultimate answer. But for the interim, it may be helpful to reduce the amount of grass. It's something we've just talked about internally. I don't know if that makes any sense. Maybe they just walk 10 feet more or a quarter mile more to get to the grass. So Brooke has his hand up.
Yeah, we have codified certain sections where we do limit grass within, you know, those gate and fence areas. Additionally, some of the new planned unit developments, we limit the water wise, limit overall grass within the medians and stuff like that. So we've started to approach that, understanding that what we can do to deter the horses from coming down is you know, another thing. But I would like to reiterate that, as Councilmember Dorr said, the fencing really is the most critical element of this.
So with that, I am going to start to wrap us up with a couple of key points, and then Councilmember Dewar, I'll pass it to you for closing comments. As I mentioned before, to stay in touch with this topic and to stay in the loop, reno.gov/horses, it will take you to this page. You will see all of the information from previous sessions as well as FAQs. Again, by being at this meeting, you're on the email distribution list where you will receive information as updates and highlights and important changes or newsworthy information is ready to be shared. So that is how you can get push updates. So look out for those communications. And then of course, to go dig a little bit deeper, reno.gov/horses. I will also put up just this last little bit of information. Again, really appreciate everybody being here. This is the Wild Horse Hotline as well. You heard Tracy talk about using that for when you see illegal feeding, horses that need a rescue, etc. That is the number. So with that, again, thank you so much for being here. We had about 80 citizens participate. Important topic, a lot of considerations as we move forward. Stick with us. There will be a lot more information forthcoming. Councilmember Dewar, wrap us up.
Sure. As a wrap up, I would always want to know, well, what are the next steps? Where do we go from here? I don't want people to think that we're just talking. What's happening here is you are giving very valuable information in terms of the way that you are asking your questions. Often there's an implied proposal embedded in a question, and notes are being taken right now. The group will gather together and continue to digest. We'll continue working with Commander Garlock on speeding issues. For example, that is not going away. We're going to continue working with NDOT on getting some costs and marking out the location of the fencing. Really important question was brought up about working with private landowners. That is going to have to happen one way or the other, both for this open space corridor through the Virginia Range, as well as working on establishing a fence. What you basically need is a project manager on the ground. You need someone to be able to handle that. We don't have that today. We're very lucky to have Erica Olson to help facilitate these meetings, gather the information, compile it, as well as a number of staff that you don't see on the Zoom today. So I believe, and I'll ask Jackie, I think the point was we weren't ready to set a fourth meeting at this point. So there's no set date. I think a lot of processing has to happen in terms of what we heard here tonight, the kinds of questions that were asked, the feeling, I guess, even the unspoken feeling, if you want to go so far as to how people are feeling. I think there's a community desire to move in the direction that we're moving. In other words, keep people safe, keep horses safe. And then there's some additional range issues. I heard, carrying capacity. Is there such a thing? Who has the answer to that? That is not generally, the City of Reno doesn't generally do range management or resource analysis type work. But that doesn't mean that we can't work with some nonprofits and some other groups and potentially, hire a project manager to work on the ground with private landowners. I personally think that's one of the key next steps once we get some cost information, because what a typical landowner would want to know is, well, what is this going to cost? And how long is it going to take? And when are you going to do it? And what impact will it have on my land? All of those questions we have to be prepared to answer. I mean, anyone would ask those kind of questions. So what I think is the biggest takeaway here is that the city has remained committed to exploring the issue and addressing the issue. We're not walking away. We're not pretending it doesn't exist. We understand new residents are moving in that didn't know they're moving into a wild horse area. And so that's why the education piece is so important. And I think a follow on right now is that part of our plan was to do a lot of public messaging at this time of the year during the fall about the horse movement. And I guess I would ask those that are in that space here, whether that is Tracy or someone at the city, to sort of talk about what that's about. You know, what kind of messaging do we expect to be doing over the next couple months about horses?
So this is Jackie. I'll start. And so we are definitely going to continue the education campaign. I think so far it has been quite successful. And we do have a communications plan that kind of details out what we're going to be doing through the fall and into the winter as we move into spring. As you heard, the other thing that we will be focusing on is trying to get the speed limits down a little bit on that one portion of veterans. Should there be a horse vehicle collision, that we want to minimize the damage as much as possible. And then we're going to be working through the fencing program. The fencing is going to be the most challenging. I loved Amanda's ideas of including this topic in their Citizens Institute. I think that is a fantastic solution. And John has some great ideas for Amanda. So I think that that will be very helpful as we move forward. But those are really the three main things where we are right now. We need to continue to solicit feedback from the public. We want to make that as easy as possible. So you can always reach out to Councilmember Doer directly, or you can go through the website that Erica showed earlier and submit your feedback. You could always go straight to Reno Direct. But I think that we developed solutions because of your input up until now, and that we're going to need to continue to do so.
And as far as when a next get together would be, I mean, I do expect there will be one. I would just expect it probably in the February-March timeframe. That will give us some time through the next few months to gather the kind of data that we need to gather, and also find out right off the bat if there are funds available. I mean, my understanding for NDOT is that there potentially are funds in some one or two bills in the infrastructure bill that do deal with under or overpasses. I know that Nevada Department of Agriculture has maybe been awarded but not received some funding that would potentially help to get started with the fencing, maybe do the fencing plan, and also add a person onto their staff to be more proactive with us up here. So I think all of those things are going to come to fruition over the next couple months, finding out what money's in the bills, what's available, and what we have to work with at least to get started.
Councilmember Doer, this is again Tara Smaltz with NDOT. This isn't entirely my bailiwick, but I will add, I do believe that there are federal grants that the cities and counties and other departments of interest can seek out. And the state can assist in helping those entities seek that out if there are additional questions. I can definitely put those interests and parties in contact with our planning section with NDOT that can help create resources
Just
there.
consider right now we're making a formal request. We will put it in writing if that's what you need, but if you could assist us with that and guide us to the right funding sources, the right application timeframes, the right way to prepare these proposals for the grant funds, that you would be doing a huge service to our community.
Okay.
So that's what I have. I think, Erica, it sounds like we are wrapped up and we've talked about what to expect in coming months. I'm saying that I think in late winter, early spring is when we might gather again. I'm just guessing, so don't put that on your calendar. It's just what I'm going to shoot for. And I think we'll have some good information by then, some new information to share.
Awesome. And yes, and to that point, we have definitely been putting these community meetings on when we've got important information to share and are in that place again to get the conversation going as we did today. So with that, we'll call it a wrap. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here on this Monday. Thanks for being part of the community that we all love and is near and dear to our hearts. So we'll continue the conversation, both, again, as Councilmember Dewar said, via email, via communication, and also please bookmark the site, because that is where we will be having asynchronous conversations. So with that, have an awesome week. Be well. Thank you for being here. Take care.